Thank you very much, Paulette, for those kind words and for your exceptional leadership as chair of our board. The video we watched portrayed some of the BGA's work for our city and our state over the last 100 years. And today, we are working to ensure that the BGA's most impactful work is yet ahead of us. Chicago and Illinois still have challenges, and in addressing them, we can only rely on big-shouldered, big-hearted residents, Illinoisans like you here who join us in demanding better from our government. In the last year alone, our teams have continued to demonstrate the same tenacity and urgency as our founders. The BGA's newsroom is in the midst of a transformative change. As you may have noticed, our newsroom has rebranded with the new website, the Illinois Answers Project, and new logos, as you can see on this cool little thing we have on the podium. The name fits. As ever before, we are demanding answers from the government and from others in society. We also have added a substantial commitment to solutions-focused journalism, thanks to a multi-year grant from the McCormick Foundation. Answers are the aim of solutions reporting too. Answers to problems like crime, government waste, struggling schools, and inequities in public housing. For us, a successful story doesn't stop at publication or likes or shares. A successful Illinois Answers story has impact. It changes minds and lives. It lifts up the voices of residents most affected by secrecy, by inequity, by a lack of accountability for government. And our solutions reporting shows a potential path forward. As just one example, we won the BJ's first ever Pulitzer last year for our investigation into dozens of fatal fires in buildings where the city knew dangerous conditions existed. Most of the dead were people of color living in poor neighborhoods. We have continued investigating and providing in-depth solutions reporting too. A strong recent report from Denver, Colorado described how the city is requiring landlords to earn licenses by complying with a deep checklist of safety requirements. Inspections are conducted by independent inspectors, not a city agency. These approaches bear important lessons for Chicago. For Chicago's City Council, saving lives, it's never too late to start saving lives, and action on this important issue is long overdue. A separate Illinois Answers investigation last year found abuse and neglect in the Department of Children and Family Services. A state audit and a lawsuit from the public guardian followed, and last week the agency's director resigned, clearing the way for new leadership. Last month, we explored possible solutions to the state's woefully underfunded pension system in a 5-part series of columns in the Tribune and on the Illinois Answers website. We believe this work constructively informs discussions of state pension reform that are just getting underway. We are expanding geographically too. Sharp cuts in newsrooms across the state have created news deserts in Illinois. More than a third of Illinois newspapers have shut since 2005, the most of any state. A new commitment from the Driehaus Foundation is enabling the BGA to add journalists dedicated exclusively to working with newsrooms in Rockford, Joliet, Springfield, and other cities. These reporters, we're calling them embeds, will partner with local newsrooms to produce investigative and solution stories statewide. As the Illinois Answers newsroom does its work, our small but mighty BGA policy team is achieving its own impact. Chicago City Council this summer enacted a proposal first made by BGA Policy to take the politics out of succession in the Chicago Inspector General's office. The new ordinance requires the mayor to meet strict deadlines for nominating a successor. No more slow walking that appointment. And new term limits guard against an IG becoming entrenched in the job. BGA Policy's department by department examination of the Chicago city budget, first published last year, has become a source of discussion and debate in city council budget hearings, which will follow Mayor Johnson's address this morning. And on a statewide basis, we're fighting for a more accountable and open judicial branch. Illinois is one of only 5 U.S. states where courts can deny all requirements, all records requests about the functioning of the court system and systemic inequities in court rulings. They can exist hidden behind a code of secrecy. To address this problem, BGA Policy has formed a coalition of 12 organizations seeking to require Illinois courts to honor open records requests. A bill was introduced in the legislature with work to do to get it passed into law. The efforts of our news and policy teams are augmented by a new arm of the BGA, a civic outreach team that is planning follow-up meetings in communities that are the focus of our work. Funding from the Elizabeth Morris Trust will enable the BGA to hold monthly public meetings in a diverse array of communities. We'll learn firsthand how government affects people's lives while providing residents the tools they need to demand better from their government. For 100 years, every decade, every year, every day, the BGA has deployed a tenacious and dedicated staff and worked with people in the community to achieve more transparency, more equity, and more accountability from governments. We were there to fight back in the 1920s when the Capone mob controlled City Hall. We went undercover to expose fraudulent doctors and negligent nursing homes. We even bought a bar in the 1970s, the Mirage Tavern, to expose corruption in licensing and inspections. Our investigations have helped send crooked politicians to jail. Our modern day work is building on those achievements and providing solutions for the way forward. By joining us here today, you are part of that work. You are part of the fight for better government. You are helping to provide the answers that will benefit the people of Illinois, today, tomorrow, and well into our second century of vitally important work. Thank you for your attention, and thank you very much for your support. And now, I'm proud to introduce this year's 2023 Watchdog honoree, Michael Sachs. The BGA's Daniel L. Goodwin Watchdog Award honors a person who exemplifies the BGA's commitment to transparent, equitable, and accountable government for the benefit of the people of Illinois. Michael Sachs is one such person. He has served as a problem solver for mayors and governors, fighting for adequate state funding for the Chicago Public Schools, working to fix a badly flawed lease of Chicago's parking meters, and advancing Chicago's economic development as the head of World Business Chicago. After the July 4th massacre in Highland Park, he worked to secure the state's assault weapons ban. In journalism, Michael's contributions are unmatched, and his contributions to journalism are a key reason why we are honoring him here today. Without his unwavering commitment, the Chicago Sun-Times might have closed its doors years ago. Michael helped engineer the Sun-Times merger with Chicago Public Media, which has created one of the most ambitious and innovative newsrooms in Chicago. Together with his wife, Carrie, who chairs the Museum of Contemporary Arts Board, Michael has established a program to help low-income CPS graduates attend Northwestern University. And with his partners at GCM Grosvenor, some of whom are here today, thank you for coming, he has established a program to create a pipeline for CPS students into medicine and the biomedical sciences. Please join me in welcoming Michael Sachs to the stage to accept the BGA's Daniel L. Goodwin Watchdog Award.
I'm okay here, yeah?
I think they'll want to take a picture.
We'll do it later. We're going to get the pictures later. Thank you all. So David, thank you. Paulette, thank you. Thank you to the BGA, to all of the co-chairs today that lent their name to something that I was also on the program with. I appreciate that. John Canning, Daniel Goodwin, Jim Reynolds, John Rogers, Heather Staines. Thank you very much. And to all of you for being here today. And of course, for your support of the BGA. The first thing that I need to say is that from my perspective, today is about what we did with the Sun-Times and Chicago Public Media. But anything that I've ever worked on that's been constructive and added value has always been a group effort and been a team effort. And certainly working on the Sun-Times and the Sun-Times Chicago Public Media merger was not about me, but was a group effort and a team effort. There were numerous groups that worked to support the Sun-Times in the wake of the changed business model that plagues local print journalism. John Canning and Bruce Sagan made real, and real is a synonym for expensive in this world. They made real efforts. My partner, Jorge Ramirez, and a group of labor leaders made real efforts. And Carrie and my partners at GCM Grosvenor and Rocky Wirtz supported the effort that led to the merger. And I just want to make that clear from the start, that this is all about team. The reason we have all done that, and the reason all of those groups at different points in time worked to keep the Sun-Times going, is simply because journalism, which is at the very core of the BGA, is important. Journalism functions as a watchdog, ensuring our leaders remain responsible and diligent. It provides information and analysis that informs decisions, and it drives public engagement to action. And it's not just the big stories, the big global national stories, or the sensational or celebrity stories that are important. Reporting on our state and local politics, our public finances and public safety, our educational system and the policies surrounding it, our public health, our culture, it all matters. That's what our journalists, and I see there are some journalists in the room, that's what our journalists do. They've done it in the face of tremendous economic pressure from rapid technological change, and we need them to keep doing it. I don't think most of them can do anything else, so we're fortunate there. I didn't mean that, I meant that in a good way. I meant that about passion and commitment and being artists. That is the way I meant that. That is what I was trying to say. And they are committed, and they are passionate, and we need to keep helping them do what they do. And as frustrated as any of us may have ever been with coverage on anything that touched, on our lives or things we were involved with, there's no question that no coverage at all would be much worse for everybody. So we can have a little round for the journalists. They keep doing it. And so that's why when Jorge came to me with Chris Fusco and Nakia Wright in January of 19 and told me that after a valiant effort by the labor community, the Sun-Times was going to have a hard time making payroll, I decided to help out. The paper was absolutely in trouble. It had about 175 employees, 100 of them or so in the newsroom, and the content served and informed between print and digital, all forms, close to 2 million people a week. And so we thought it was important to keep it going. Rocky Wirtz fortunately agreed and helped out. And after a couple of years with Chris and Nakia fighting to make things work, an angel appeared in the form of Chicago Public Media Board Chair Brian Traubert, who brought in his then interim, he was then board chair, I don't believe he is any longer, brought in his then interim CEO, Matt Moog. They both understood the importance of keeping Chicago a two-paper town and the need for an economic model that would rely on community to navigate the changing landscape. They saw the synergies with Chicago Public Media that would result in a better product, better coverage, and a better outcome for Chicago and our communities. And so we agreed to contribute the paper and to continue to fund losses for a while. And Brian and Penny provided considerable support, and Matt Moog partnered with John Palfrey at the MacArthur Foundation, without whom this never would have happened. MacArthur Foundation gets a ton of credit. And then Matt brought in other contributors, and collectively the effort secured the paper's future. And then you gave me this award, so this honor. So thank you again for that. But that whole team, that's the real story, and that whole team deserves this, and they deserve your applause. So David told me that after I said thank yous, he wanted me to spend a few minutes talking about a policy issue of my choosing, one that's important to all of us in Illinois. Knowing David, as many of you do, David very, very strongly suggested that that policy issue be state finances and pensions. And so, David, I am going to do that in a minute, but if you will all indulge me, I do feel the need for a moment just to address the horrific attack in Israel this past weekend. I am Jewish, and I have family that lives in Israel. They've been there since the 1920s, where they were part of founding a kibbutz in the north. 4 generations. They live throughout the country now. Some are still on the original kibbutz. They're retired executives. There are 2 artists, a potter and a photographer. I have a cousin who works for a tech company in Tel Aviv, one who is a pilot in the Air Force Reserves, whose wife had a baby on Friday or Saturday and was called up on Sunday, and an Olympic-level windsurfer in the family, and a cousin who graduated from the University of Illinois at Champaign with a degree in agriculture and is now back in Israel as a botanist growing medical cannabis. How about that? It's a crazy world. They are not religious. Most of the 3rd generation have been out in the streets in protest every weekend for months, pushing back against the proposed changes to the judiciary. They are a close-knit, warm family with progressive leanings. And in thinking about it, I've figured it might just be in the DNA, of the family. Fortunately, they are all safe today. One group of them living on a moshav in the south, miraculously so. Their community was taken over by terrorists Saturday morning. They are one of the stories of a family that had to hide in a safe room, where their safe room held, despite attempts to get in. Their safe room held. And when they were ultimately rescued, they emerged to find that at least 15 of their neighbors were killed. There are still more names that haven't been released yet, and several were taken hostage with unknown fate. They are all functioning. Somehow they are all functioning. We've been connected to all of them since Saturday. Not all of them, but to many of them. Not just the ones that escaped being killed in their home, but all of the ones who've had to move from where they were living to be out of the way of rocket fire, and the one had to leave his baby in the hospital to go get called up to military duty. They are in shock. They are absolutely distraught. They are scared. They're depressed. They're discombobulated, but they are moving forward. They aren't leaving. They're staying. They will defend Israel. And these are progressives who have disagreed with and voted against the coalition in power for most of the last 15 years. They're going to stay, and they're going to try to move Israel forward in a direction that they believe is better. And they're just amazing. Now, there most certainly is a time and a place and an acute need to discuss the very nuanced issue set that is the tragic status of Gaza and the West Bank. There need to be better policies, better results, better leaders. But the intentional rape, murder, torture, and kidnapping of civilian men and women, of children and the elderly, at the direction of the terrorist organization Hamas was obscene and appalling. I simply couldn't stand here today and not comment on it, and it said it's an indulgence, and I simply can't understand any equivocation regarding the mowing down of 260 people from paragliders and cars, trucks, at a music festival, or any of the other heinous, barbaric crimes we witnessed. When we are silent, we abdicate our values. Martin Luther King said that there comes a time when silence is betrayal. And he said that in the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. To take joy from or celebrate Saturday's acts of terror, to post an image of a paraglider with the words, "I stand with Palestine." To have that go on in many places around the world, including right here in Chicago, it's just beyond my capability to comprehend. As a Jew who stands with Israel, one who's seen a real rise in hate and sees a great wave of hate and anti-Semitism and violence coming, the knowledge that people stand with Israel and stand with the Jewish people is truly affirming. The support of the president, of our elected leaders, is affirming. Your support is affirming. We're, of course, angry, but we are hurting, and we are scared, and we are anxious. I know this is not what the BGA does, and I know that this is an indulgence. I couldn't stand here today without touching on it, and I want you to know that when you speak out, when you provide support, it really does matter. Israel is going to need it. The Jewish community right here in Chicago is going to need it, and I thank you for it. Okay, thank you. So now we get to go to fun things like state fiscal condition and pensions. Okay? The topic of fiscal stability and pensions is a complex one. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that yet. It's a complex one. There are a number of different dimensions. For as many of us as there are in the room today, there are that many different answers or proposed solutions. More revenue, less expense, more efficiency, this level of reserves, these priorities. There are so many different ways to solve the puzzle that it really is, there are just so many definitions of what that puzzle is. I don't know why it keeps jumping here. And so what I want to do today is just try to make two pretty simple points that I think are helpful in this entire conversation. The first one is that our state finances have moved in a positive direction these last 5 years. They absolutely have. It's not debatable. Now, it's not enough. It's still a problem. It needs to be more. They're going to mess it up again. I get all of that. But we have made progress, and progress is really the name of the game. I don't believe this is a ever solved, there's a cleanup trade and it's over issue. You have to make progress, constantly make progress, and we've done that. And that progress has been recognized by rating agencies who've upgraded us, I think, 8 times in the last 5 years. And it's important that we recognize it. It's important that we don't just torch our own market. I'm not saying we get complacent, not saying we back off at all, but we have to acknowledge that we've made progress. So that's one point I wanted to share, and I think it's a mistake not to acknowledge that. And I think the BGA has acknowledged that, by the way. The other point I want to make relates to how we manage our balance sheet. So again, we talk a lot about revenue, we talk a lot about expense, we talk a lot about policy, but what are we doing with our balance sheet? How do we manage the liabilities that we have now? And specifically, how are we approaching the amortization of our pension debt? We'll leave the Bond Act for another conversation. That can be looked at too. Our unfunded pension liabilities, our pension debt, if you will, is immense. And it's the result of long periods of bad behavior. That debt is currently scheduled to be 90% retired 22 years from now. So the way our law works now, that debt goes down to 10% by 22 years. That's our current law. And the payments needed to pay off 90% of that immense pension debt are tremendous. So whenever we talk about pensions, we see and we start with this chart. And this chart shows our increasing pension payments over the next 22 years to retire 90% of that pension debt, along with obviously serving the beneficiaries of the pension funds. And that chart will scare the daylights out of anybody. You look at that and it's just straight up and to the right, and increasingly getting, tougher and tougher, and we have to find another $10 billion to be dumping in, and that is a scary, scary chart. And that chart puts a lot of pressure on taxes, and that chart puts a lot of pressure, from investment, starts investment, because we look at it and we say, my goodness, where are we going to find all this money for the pensions? What you don't see most often when you're having a pension discussion, what isn't really included is what happens after this. What happens in the next year and then after that? And when you look at that, you see a very different picture, which is that in 2046, by design, by our plan, by law today, we're scheduling a $17 billion tax cut. So my joke is it's going to be really good to be governor in 2046 because you're going to get to cut $17 billion of taxes and they're going to make you emperor, okay? The shape of this curve makes absolutely no sense. And so my second point really is just that we have to address the shape of this curve. It's honestly silly to have anything like this, which is this 1 year, $17 billion drop. And we're putting ourselves under so much pressure, forcing conversations about raising all of our taxes, forcing conversations about cutting spending, forcing conversations about denying investment, because we've got this goofy curve. So we got to fix this. This has to get fixed. And we have to work together in a bipartisan fashion to fix it. I started out, I don't believe there's one right answer. So I just, what could this is not intended to be substantive, this picture. I'll give you a substantive one in a minute. This is just like me with a pen saying, okay, look, if we don't go up as strong, but then we don't go down as fast, look what we get to do. We don't have to raise all that money in the earlier years, and we can therefore not raise taxes, which, believe me, you keep that curve, a lot of pressure on taxes for the next 22 years. You can make investments you're not going to otherwise make because you're fighting for resources. So, that's not the right answer, that curve, and I'm not at all saying it is. It's just the idea of don't go up as high, don't go down as low. Let's be smarter about how we're dealing with this. There is a comprehensive plan out there. This is from the Civic Committee, who had a very serious, very intense effort on state finances. This is their idea. They would like to see you go up higher in the short term through some temporary fixed term taxes dedicated and lockboxed for pensions, and then go down lower, and they've got it even getting fully paid off earlier. That happens, there's no question our borrowing costs go down, there's no question after that temporary tax comes off, there's a lot more economics to invest in the state, and there's no taking away of resources from things that are being done today because they're proposing a temporary tax for it. This would be well received, it would work. I'm not anywhere near that far along, although this would be terrific. I'm not that far along. Politically, that plan and all the bells and whistles in it may not be possible. My second point that I want to leave you with after we have made progress is we've got to address this curve. The constraints on the curve are the bells and whistles in the rating agencies. Those, to me, are the constraints on the curve. This is not an intelligent plan, and it's not an intelligent plan. It should be changed. We should work together in a bipartisan way to change it, and we should give ourselves a much more stable, cleaner financial path forward that enables us to manage our taxes and manage our investments and our competitiveness as a state. So those are the two ideas. Thank you very much for the recognition and the honor, for the work with the Sun-Times, and thank you all for listening. Thanks.